Here's something that'll absolutely blow your mind, and I guarantee you haven't heard this anywhere else. Royale and Lil Durk secretly got married right before the feds came knocking at his door. Let that sink in for a moment. You don't rush to tie the knot in secret unless you know something catastrophic is about to hit. And when that something involves federal murder for hire charges and the possibility of never seeing freedom again, suddenly their entire relationship timeline starts making perfect sense. While everyone's been arguing about cheating scandals and unfollowing drama on social media, they completely missed the real story happening behind the scenes. This wasn't about hurt feelings or another woman sliding into DMs. This was about a calculated decision involving federal investigations, spousal privilege, and a woman who finally realized that love doesn't mean going down with a sinking ship. The truth behind India's choice to distance herself isn't just messy, it's potentially life-threatening. But here's what makes this even more shocking. The marriage wasn't some romantic gesture or proof of their unbreakable bond. It was strategic. It was desperate. It was the last move two people make when they know the walls are closing in and federal agents are building a case that could destroy everything they've ever worked for. Royale wasn't just protecting her heart when she stepped back from this relationship. She was protecting her freedom, her future, and her daughter's chance at a normal life. The real reason India left goes deeper than any blog post or gossip channel has ever dared to explore. Because when your man is facing charges that could put him away for life, and when your home becomes a target for violence, and when federal agents start asking questions about your involvement, suddenly relationship problems become survival problems, and Royale chose to survive. 2024 was supposed to be their year. Instead, it became the year everything they'd built together started crumbling faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. By the time October rolled around, India had watched her world transform from Instagram-perfect couple goals into a federal investigation that would make headlines across the country. The signs were everywhere, but most people were too busy watching their relationship drama to notice the real storm brewing. The feds had been circling for months, building their case piece by piece, while Durk continued living like he was untouchable. But India, she was paying attention. She saw the increased security, the paranoid late-night phone calls, the way conversations stopped when she walked into rooms. When you're living with someone who's constantly looking over their shoulder, you start doing the same thing. And what India saw terrified her. The federal agents weren't just investigating some random street beef. They were building a conspiracy case that painted Durk as the mastermind behind a murder-for-hire plot targeting Quando Rondo. Court documents would later reveal alleged payments for flights, hotels, and equipment used in the attempted hit. This wasn't some impulsive street retaliation. According to prosecutors, this was calculated, funded, and orchestrated from the top down. But here's what made India's situation even more dangerous. Federal conspiracy charges don't just target the main players. They go after everyone in the circle: wives, girlfriends, business partners, anyone who might have known about the plans or helped facilitate them in any way. India found herself potentially implicated in a case she never wanted to be part of, facing questions about conversations she may have overheard or transactions she might have witnessed. The breaking point came when she realized that standing by her man could mean standing in a federal courtroom as a defendant herself. Love is powerful, but it's not worth risking decades in prison. India had watched other women in similar situations lose everything: their freedom, their children, their entire futures, all because they chose loyalty over self-preservation. She refused to become another cautionary tale about what happens when you stay too long in a dangerous game you never signed up to play. Everyone saw the designer bags, the expensive dinners, the picture-perfect family moments on Instagram. But what they didn't see was the reality behind those carefully curated posts. The sleepless nights when India would wake up to find Durk gone, handling business that she was better off not knowing about. The constant phone calls at all hours with voices she didn't recognize, discussing things in code. The way their home slowly transformed from a sanctuary into a fortress, with security cameras, armed guards, and protocols for everything. India wasn't naive. She knew what she signed up for when she chose to be with someone whose reputation was built on more than just music. But there's a difference between knowing your man has a street background and watching that background actively threaten your child's safety. When gunfire erupted at their residence, shattering windows and sending them diving for cover, India experienced a terror that no amount of designer clothes could ever compensate for. The glamorous lifestyle came with a price tag that went far beyond money. India found herself constantly walking on eggshells, never knowing which conversation might be recorded, which friend might be working with law enforcement, or which public appearance might be used against them later in court. The paranoia became suffocating. Date nights required security details. Family gatherings needed background checks. Even something as simple as going to their daughter's school events became a calculated risk. But the most exhausting part wasn't the security measures or the legal precautions. It was pretending everything was normal while living in constant fear. India became an expert at smiling for cameras while her heart was racing with anxiety. She perfected the art of posting happy couple content while secretly researching federal sentencing guidelines and spousal privilege laws. Every public appearance became a performance. Every social media post a carefully crafted illusion designed to maintain the facade that their relationship was thriving. The truth is, India had been planning her exit long before anyone noticed the unfollowing on social media. She'd been quietly consulting lawyers, securing her own financial independence, and creating safety nets for herself and her daughter. Because when you're living with someone whose enemies are willing to shoot up your home, you don't just pack your bags and leave. You plan, you prepare, and you wait for the right moment to execute your escape without putting yourself in even more danger. When the feds finally made their move in October 2024, it wasn't some spontaneous arrest. This was the culmination of a massive investigation that had been building for years, with agents methodically gathering evidence, wiretapping phones, and tracking financial transactions. The charges they brought against Durk weren't just serious. They were career-ending, life-destroying, and potentially family-shattering. We're talking about conspiracy to commit murder for hire, a federal charge that carries a mandatory minimum of 10 years and can result in life imprisonment. The government's case reads like something straight out of a crime thriller. According to court documents, Durk allegedly orchestrated and financed a hit on Quando Rondo in retaliation for King Von's death. But this wasn't some impulsive street justice. Prosecutors claim he paid for flights to bring shooters from Chicago to California, covered hotel expenses, and even provided funding for equipment and vehicles. The level of detail in the federal indictment suggests they have recordings, financial records, and potentially cooperating witnesses who can testify about the entire operation. What makes this case even more damaging is the timing. Federal agents arrested Durk just hours before he was supposed to board a private jet to Italy. That's not coincidence. That's law enforcement showing they were monitoring his every move and had been for months. The fact that they waited until he was about to leave the country suggests they had concerns about him becoming a flight risk, which doesn't look good when you're trying to argue for bond in federal court. But here's what makes India's situation absolutely terrifying. Federal conspiracy cases don't just target the main defendant. They go after everyone in the organization, everyone who might have facilitated the crime, and everyone who might have knowledge about the operation. Wives and girlfriends often find themselves facing charges for money laundering, conspiracy, or obstruction of justice. Even if India never directly participated in any criminal activity, simply being present for certain conversations or having access to financial accounts could make her a target. The feds have a conviction rate of over 90%. When they bring charges, they're not taking chances or making assumptions. They have evidence, they have witnesses, and they have a strategy to win. For India, watching the case unfold meant realizing that her proximity to Durk had potentially made her a person of interest in a federal investigation that could destroy her life even if she was completely innocent. The government doesn't care about love stories when they're building conspiracy cases. They care about patterns, connections, and anyone who might have played a role in the alleged crimes. Picture this scenario for a moment. The man you love, the father of your child, is sitting in a federal holding cell facing charges that could put him away for the rest of his natural life. Meanwhile, you're getting calls from lawyers warning you that your own freedom might be at risk simply because you shared a bed with him. The media is watching your every move. Federal agents might be building a case against you. And your daughter is asking why daddy isn't coming home. What do you do? India found herself trapped in an impossible situation that would break most people. Standing by Durk meant potentially sacrificing everything she'd built for herself and her daughter. But walking away meant being labeled a traitor, facing threats from his supporters, and living with the guilt of abandoning someone she genuinely loved during their darkest hour. There's no guidebook for navigating this kind of crisis. No right answer that doesn't come with devastating consequences. The pressure from both sides was suffocating. Durk's fans expected her to be the ride-or-die girlfriend who would sell everything she owned to pay for his legal defense. They wanted her to show up to every court hearing, post supportive messages on social media, and prove her loyalty by sacrificing her own future for his legal battles. But her own family and friends were begging her to think about her daughter's future, to consider what would happen if she got caught up in federal charges herself. Then there were the practical realities that nobody talks about. Federal cases drag on for years, costing hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. Assets get frozen, bank accounts get seized, and suddenly you're not just emotionally devastated, you're financially ruined. India had her own businesses, her own income streams, and her own responsibilities that couldn't be put on hold while Durk fought for his freedom. She had to make a choice between supporting him and protecting her own financial stability. But the most heartbreaking part of India's impossible choice was the timing. Just when Durk needed her most, she realized that staying close to him could destroy her daughter's future. How do you explain to a child that mommy might go to prison too because she tried to help daddy? How do you risk your daughter growing up without both parents because you refuse to distance yourself from a federal investigation? India faced the crushing realization that true love sometimes means making the hardest decision of your life, even when it feels like betrayal. Now here's where this story takes a turn that nobody saw coming, and it reveals just how desperate your situation had become. While everyone was focused on social media unfollows and breakup rumors, India and Durk were quietly making one of the most strategic decisions of their lives. They got married in secret, and the timing wasn't romantic. It was calculated. This wasn't about love conquering all. This was about legal protection in the face of a federal investigation that could destroy them both. Spousal privilege is a real thing in federal court, and it can be the difference between testifying against your partner or being legally protected from having to reveal certain conversations. When federal agents are building conspiracy cases, they rely heavily on testimony from people close to the defendants. Wives, girlfriends, business partners, and family members often become key witnesses in these cases. But marriage changes that dynamic significantly, giving couples certain legal protections that unmarried partners don't have. The secret wedding wasn't India choosing love over logic. It was her making one final strategic move to protect both of them before the walls completely closed in. Think about the timing for a moment. They get married, and then within weeks, Durk is arrested on federal charges. That's not coincidence. That's two people who knew exactly what was coming and made a desperate attempt to shield themselves legally before the storm hit. But here's what makes this marriage even more complex. While spousal privilege can protect certain communications between husband and wife, it doesn't make you immune from federal prosecution. If India had any direct involvement in the alleged crimes, or if she benefited financially from illegal activities, marriage wouldn't save her from charges. The wedding ring becomes a shield only if you're truly innocent of the underlying crimes. The marriage also reveals just how serious India was about protecting herself and her daughter. She wasn't just some girlfriend who could walk away easily. By becoming Durk's wife, she gained certain legal rights and protections, but she also tied herself to his case in ways that would make it even harder to distance herself later. It was a calculated risk that shows just how complex their situation had become. India was playing chess, while everyone else thought they were watching a simple breakup story unfold on social media. The streets don't care about your family. They don't care about your children's bedtime stories or your daughter's school plays. When you're connected to someone whose reputation was built on street credibility, those same streets eventually come to collect. And for India, that collection notice came in the form of bullets flying through her living room windows while her child was sleeping upstairs. King Vaughn's death changed everything in Durk's world, and by extension, India's world too. What started as grief over losing a close friend quickly morphed into something much more dangerous, a cycle of retaliation that would ultimately lead to federal charges and destroyed lives. India watched helplessly as Durk's loyalty to his fallen friend consumed him, turning their home into a command center for street justice rather than a sanctuary for their family. The problem with street politics is that they never stay in the streets. They follow you home, they affect your relationships, and they put everyone you love at risk. India found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, not because of anything she'd done, but because of who she chose to love. Her daughter couldn't have normal playdates because of security concerns. Family gatherings required background checks on guests. Even simple trips to the grocery store became potential targets for enemies who wanted to send a message. But here's what really destroyed India's sense of safety. The violence wasn't just theoretical anymore. When their home got shot up, when bullets shattered windows and sent them diving for cover, India realized that her daughter was living in a war zone. No amount of love or loyalty was worth subjecting a child to that kind of trauma. The streets had officially invaded their family space, and India knew it was only going to get worse. The final straw came when India realized that Durk's street obligations would always come before his family obligations. The alleged murder-for-hire plot wasn't just about revenge. It was about maintaining a reputation that required constant violence to uphold. India watched the man she loved choose street credibility over their daughter's safety, and that's when she knew their relationship was over. You can't build a future with someone whose past keeps trying to kill you. So what's the real reason India Royale stepped back from Lil Durk? It wasn't the cheating muumuus, though those hurt. It wasn't the social media drama, though that was exhausting. It wasn't even the federal charges, though those were terrifying. The real reason was much simpler and much more devastating than any of that. India realized that loving Durk meant accepting that her daughter might grow up without a mother. And that was a sacrifice she wasn't willing to make. Every woman who's ever loved a man caught up in street life faces this moment eventually. The moment when you realize that standing by your man might mean standing in a prison cell yourself. The moment when loyalty becomes a prison sentence and love becomes a death warrant. India had that moment when she understood that federal conspiracy charges don't just target the main defendant. They target everyone close enough to be considered part of the operation. The real reason goes deeper than self-preservation, though that was certainly part of it. India looked at her daughter and realized that this little girl deserved a mother who could be present for school plays, graduations, and all the moments that matter. She deserved a mother who wasn't constantly worried about federal agents, street retaliation, or legal battles that could drag on for years. India chose her daughter's future over her own heart, and that's the kind of sacrifice that takes real strength. But there's another layer to this that people don't want to acknowledge. India was smart enough to see the writing on the wall before everyone else. While fans were debating whether she should ride or die, she was consulting lawyers and understanding exactly what federal conspiracy charges meant for everyone in Durk's circle. She wasn't abandoning him. She was protecting herself from a system that would gladly destroy her life to make their case against him. The real reason India stepped back was because she understood something that took everyone else months to figure out. This wasn't a temporary setback that they could overcome together. This was a life-altering crisis that would define the next decade of their lives, and she refused to let it define her daughter's childhood too. She chose survival over sentiment, strategy over blind loyalty, and her daughter's future over her own broken heart. That's not weakness. That's the hardest kind of strength there is. India Royale has been playing chess while everyone else thought it was checkers. By 2024, the writing was already on the wall. Federal agents had been building their case for months, and anyone close to Durk's circle knew things were about to get real ugly, real fast. The home invasions, the street wars, the constant looking over shoulders. That was just the beginning. When you're dealing with someone whose name is tied to alleged murder-for-hire plots, your relationship problems go way beyond typical couple issues. India wasn't just dealing with baby mama drama and cheating accusations anymore. She was staring down the barrel of a federal investigation that could destroy everything she'd built for herself and her daughter. The feds don't play games. When they arrested Durk in October 2024, they came with a conspiracy charge that carries serious time. We're talking about alleged plots against Quando Rondo, street retaliation for King Von's death, and a web of violence that stretches back years. India found herself connected to all of it, whether she wanted to be or not. But here's where it gets really interesting. Despite everything falling apart around them, India and Durk made one last desperate move. They got married in secret. Not for love, not for Instagram likes, but for legal protection. Spousal privilege is real, and when you're facing federal charges, every legal advantage matters. That marriage wasn't romantic. It was strategic. The Chicago streets that made Durk also marked him for destruction. His connection to the Black Disciples, his loyalty to King Von, his ongoing beef with rival crews, all of that baggage became India's burden too. She didn't sign up to be part of a street war, but that's exactly what happened when she chose to stand by her man. Living with someone whose enemies are willing to shoot up your home changes everything. India experienced that terror firsthand when gunfire erupted at their residence. Most women would have packed their bags that night, but India stayed. She stayed through the federal surveillance, through the mounting legal bills, through the constant fear that every day might be their last together. The breaking point came when reality hit hard. Durk's trial got pushed back to October 2025, meaning he's looking at potentially years behind bars even before any conviction. His bond was denied, leaving him stuck in federal custody with no chance of getting out anytime soon. For India, that was the moment everything became clear. You can't build a future with someone who might spend the rest of their life in prison. You can't raise a daughter in an environment where federal agents are always watching. You can't keep pretending that love conquers all when all includes murder charges and life sentences. India finally realized that supporting her man didn't mean sacrificing her own future. The real reason India stepped back wasn't betrayal or weakness. It was self-preservation. She watched other women in similar situations lose everything: their freedom, their kids, their sanity, all in the name of standing by their man. India chose a different path. She chose herself and her daughter's future over blind loyalty to someone whose choices put them all at risk. Even now, with Durk locked up and facing decades in prison, India continues to support his children and maintain some level of connection. But she's doing it from a safe distance, protecting herself legally and emotionally. She learned that you can love someone without destroying yourself in the process. The streets will always try to drag you down. India Royale refused to let that happen. She saw the writing on the wall and made the hardest decision of her life. That's not abandonment. That's survival. And sometimes, survival looks a lot like walking away from the person you love most.